All right, hello. My name is Aaron. Um, Here today with some more literature ramblings. I've been reading a lot recently, and I really miss reading. I read a lot when I was a kid. I was like a really avid reader. I was really good at it. I read all the way through high school, and then I got to college, and I kind of stopped. And it's an unfortunate fact of life. I kind of wasn't around books as much. I was around other things that distracted me from reading books. Yeah, probably about half a year ago, 9 months ago or so, I really started getting back into reading. And one series that I have always really been interested in, I've kind of been lesserly exposed to, but have always had an interest in and have friends and family who are big fans of, is Tolkien's series of literature in The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings. So I'm gonna go ahead and just show you quickly my my Tolkien literature. This is the first book I ever owned by Tolkien. It was his first. It's not really an installment in the series, but it is a good introduction and kind of a yeah. That's kind of really what it is an introduction to the series. It's a great book, a great story. Kind of gives you an idea of the lore of Middle Earth and introduces some really important characters. Bilbo, Gollum, Gandalf, and also provides a little bit more lore in the dwarf area. If you read Lord of the Rings, you'll find some of the dwarf, because there's a lot of dwarf, I guess you would call it, lore. A lot of dwarf lore that kind of not necessarily gets passed over, but kind of harks back to this story, which it's a really good introduction, and I would recommend reading The Hobbit first if you're gonna read Lord of the Rings. It's not totally necessary though. And then this is just a new copy of The Hobbit that I got, because this one is absolutely destroyed. It's probably like 10 years old, but it's been a long time in my car and in various book bags and being carted around to various different apartments that I've lived in ever since I read it, and yeah, so it's seen better days. So I got a new pretty copy that I'll open up one of these days. And then probably 2 or 3 years ago, I found this, which is a box set that it's my mother's. She read it probably back in high school or something. I don't know. It's a really old box set and a very pretty fragile. Some of the books had already lost their covers, like the Fellowship of the Ring. Literally, right when I pulled it out of the box, it had no cover. And then some of the other covers I accidentally knocked off, which I apologize, Mother. But I put them in the box here, so so they still exist. They're just not on the books. But yeah, that's kind of a cool little box set, a little kind of a family heirloom. And then this past Christmas, my mom heard that I was reading Lord of the Rings, and I was probably just about to get to the Return of the King at the beginning of Christmas, and she gifted me this, which is a really cool, very nice box set, hardcover box set that is pristine, and I hope I am able to keep it that way. Although my track record is not the greatest, and I'm going to grab this, which is a cool thing to outline about Lord of the Rings and the books in general. Is each copy of the book, as far as I can tell, and The Hobbit too, includes a map, which this is the map is bigger than this in the Fellowship of the Ring and the Two Towers. It's this is a map of the area that is covered in the Return of the King, although they do go back up northwest to the Shire, and they go back along their original path. But this is kind of the area of the Return of the King where most everything happens, like Mordor and Gondor and Rohan and stuff. So but that's a really cool addition, and it goes to show just how much time Tolkien actually spent on this masterpiece. He created an entire world where this story unfolded. So yeah, that's just kind of a quick little introduction to the literature I own and the literature itself. But one idea that I really wanted to talk about, kind of do a deep dive on today, is the main idea of the story, and that's the idea of the One Ring. It's a very powerful metaphor. It's one that can really be applied to a lot of different things. It's kind of it has it's kind of the pursuit. Well, it has many different connotations. You can kind of look at it as this corrupting force. You can look at it as kind of pursuing something that corrupts you, but the allure of that something, or the effect that that something gives you, kind of clouds the corruption, or makes it seem like it's not corrupting you. Drugs would probably fall into that category, and that's what I would say the main interpretation of, and probably the most correct interpretation of the One Ring is the pursuit. The most correct interpretation of its metaphor is the pursuit of power. It certainly falls into that category quite well. It is the One Ring. It's called that for a reason. It's the One Ring to rule all the rings that were created. God knows how long ago. Within the context of the story, it was they're ancient rings, ancient powerful rings. Each of them kind of has their own power, own characteristics. But this one in particular is it's the One Ring, and it's the one that kind of allows the wielder of it and of other rings to transcend the power of just those other rings by themselves. Its effects are not super well described, and as far as I can tell, this is my first reading, but as far as I can tell, the invisibility is kind of its main main thing, and kind of increased hearing. Samwise kind of experiences that when he puts on the ring at the end of Return of the King, or kind of the middle of Return. Well, actually, it's the very beginning of Return of the King, but yeah. If you read into it a little bit more, it seems to be kind of this thing that can almost, I would say, transport you into another mode of being, kind of almost another realm, or not another universe. I don't want to say that, but another. It transforms your perception of the reality around you. So, like when Samwise put it on, that's probably where you get the best description of what's actually happening when it's on. And it says he not only becomes invisible, but his hearing becomes just like insanely good. He can hear the orcs approaching. He can hear what's the name of that? The monster that attacked them. He can hear that monster. It's like a spider thing that actually attacked and killed Frodo. He didn't kill Frodo, but he stunned Frodo. And he can hear that thing like kind of, I don't know what's kind of dying. Not really dying. He's just mortally wounded, and he can hear its like death throes way down in the cave that they had just exited from, and where the monster came from. So his hearing is just insanely good, but he also gets this weird vision where things are more blurry, but also things are very different. It's almost seems kind of like a step into a new reality. And another place where this is kind of I would say supported is when Frodo and the Fellowship are kind of just, well, not they actually aren't the Fellowship yet, but it's just Frodo, the four hobbits, and Strider at that point, who they met at Bree. Frodo puts on the ring as they're being attacked by some ring wraiths, and you can't really see a ring wraith with just your eyes, but when he puts on the ring, he can see like you can see all of it. He can see its form and its like skeletal face and things like that. So it seems to take you into this different realm, and in that way, its power is not totally understood, and I think that kind of speaks to the nature of power in and of itself, and also the mystery of it is almost part of its allure, because you want to know more about what type of reality you're being careened into. But it certainly does seem to be a metaphor for the pursuit of that mysterious kind of unknown power. Excuse me 1 second. And one place where this metaphor really is driven home is in the transformation of Smeagle to Gollum. Smeagol is essentially a normal person before he encounters the ring. He seems to be kind of maybe more of a malevolent being. The acts that he committed to actually gain possession of the ring were questionable. He was with a friend of his, and they were either swimming or they were at a river. I can't remember the exact specifics, but he killed his friend to obtain a ring that he really had no idea what it was or what it could do. And I think that also speaks to this the allure of power in general, more metaphorically, but also the allure in the story, the allure of what the actual One Ring presented. It was a very strong force that anyone who really came into contact with it kind of felt what was going on and what the ring was all about. You see that in anyone who touched the ring or even knew about the ring, knew about what the ring was. Bilbo, Frodo, even Sam to a lesser extent, although it's kind of unclear to me whether Sam is being good old Sam, kind of just being a really helpful, good friend to Frodo, or if he really wants to kind of carry the ring again, because at one point when Sam just saved Frodo, he says he kind of realizes what a burden the ring is, and he realizes what how burdened Frodo is by this quest that he's undertaken. And Sam says, well, if it's such a great burden, let me carry a little bit of it for you. And it's unclear really if that's kind of a gesture of friendship or a gesture of a desire to hold the ring again. And so yeah, but it does certainly have that magnetic pull, and yeah, it's no better expressed and no better represented in the character of Gollum. Gollum is this kind of cursed, wretched creature who has owned the ring for such a great amount of time that he knows nothing else. He knows nothing else other than keep yourself alive so that you can own the ring. It's not, which is a really interesting idea, and I think almost speaks more to the idea of its corrupting force rather than its force of power. Because Gollum is not out there using the ring as some kind of tyrant. He's not making use of the ring's power in any type of tyrannical or powerful way. He's literally just hoarding it in a cave for an undisclosed amount of time, and kind of just wallowing in the act of actually owning it, wallowing in the its corrupting force. He doesn't need anything else. And I think, yeah, that speaks more to the corrupting force of the ring as opposed to its allure of power. And I think that might be what Tolkien was trying to get across, because it speaks to the idea of power being this ultimate corrupter. How power, in the end, if you follow Gollum all the way through his kind of character, it's not really an arc because he doesn't change at all. But if you follow Gollum through the story, it's his character in the context of the ring. He is all about that corrupting force, and in the end, his pursuit of the ring and of that force is what not only destroys him but destroys the force. I mean, you could argue that Gollum was destroyed right when he found the ring. I mean, that he literally went through, in the story, he went through a name transformation. He started calling himself Gollum. He sometimes calls himself Smeagle when he's like more lucid, but yeah, but he ultimately ends up destroying himself and the ring, which is a beautiful metaphor for what the pursuit of power will actually do to somebody, and how it actually manifests itself in like a real world application. It's never a good idea, because eventually you're either going to lose your power, or you're going to lose what gives you. It's an interesting idea when you look at Gollum, because Gollum is so enamored by owning the ring that he destroys it, and it's very indicative of what power will do to you. Because if you live in that way where power is kind of like how you manifest yourself and how you conduct yourself in like a society, or even among like your peers, eventually not only will you be destroyed in that context, but you'll also your power will be destroyed. Like power is not a way to cultivate lasting relationships and societies and communities. It's a corrupting force, and it's something that really people only need a little bit of courage to break to and that's seen in Frodo. I mean, Frodo, he it's a little bit more than a little bit of courage. It's a lot bit more than a little bit of courage, but Frodo is courageous enough to undertake this like insane quest, especially if you're a hobbit who's never been out of the Shire, who doesn't know anything about the outside world, and he just throws it on his shoulders, and he carries not the ring. He throws the burden of the quest just on his shoulders, and he carries it all the way down to Mordor, and it's pretty it's an amazing thing. I know it's just a story, but it's a really powerful idea, and I think it kind of speaks to an act of faith, just having faith in general, because this entire quest is a huge act of faith. I mean, Frodo has no clue. He knows what. I mean, he's put the ring on. He can understand that it's powerful, and why someone who is powerful and also malevolent might want to own it. But he's not. No one is totally sure that the destruction of the ring is going to lead to the end of the war and ultimately the end of Saruman, or the end of Sauron. Sorry, but he just acts faithfully because ultimately because of Gandalf, kind of this almost this godlike figure to Frodo. I mean, yeah, Frodo is enamored with Gandalf, and he anything that Gandalf says to Frodo it's essentially scripture. And I think that's why when Gandalf first falls in oh my god, I'm forgetting everything. The underground dwarven city to the Balrog. I remember that. When he kind of faces off against the Balrog, disappears, everyone thinks he's dead. The Fellowship and the story just enters this very like fractured and not hopeful epoch. It's not a good time. Yeah, eventually the Fellowship ends up breaking up by way of Boromir, who is someone who is not convinced at all that the One Ring's destruction is going to lead to anything. He sees it as kind of a fool's errand, and ultimately ends up trying to obtain the One Ring for kind of the opposite reason as someone like Sauron or Saruman. He wants the One Ring because he sees it as a way to actually win the war, to use it as a force for good, and which is another interesting idea when it comes to the pursuit of power, because not everyone who is pursuing power is a bad person. It's not even necessarily ignoble or immoral to pursue power if you have good intentions. It's just short-sighted. It's kind of it's naive to think that even if you can wield your power and steward power with a certain amount of grace and morality and ethical, if you can do it ethically, then there's no guarantee that ethicalness will stretch through time. It's not if you set up a system where power is the main kind of the driving force of your system, then eventually you're going to find someone who abuses it, and I think that kind of plays itself out even in history, even in human history. I mean, there are civilizations and societies who have been kind of monarchical in that way, where they've had kings and emperors and things like that. Ancient Greece is kind of a good example, where you've had examples of amazing emperors, and then you have examples of absolutely batshit insane emperors. And this is far back history, so it's really hard to tell if things were recorded correctly. But if you look at someone like Julius Caesar, um, he he was not necessarily a tyrant. He was wielding his power correctly in the context of that time. But then if you look at somebody like Nero or one of his many insane sons, they were doing they were doing things like absolutely like it. He would take people's wives and bang them and like have all these he was just an insane person. I think at one point he made his horse like the mayor of something like Caligula. I think that's his horse's name was Caligula. He made like a mayor of a town. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's just this idea plays itself out in history, and it's a system that is based on power. Even if the person in power has all the best intentions, cannot survive over the expanse of time, because it's just not that's not how human beings work. Not how all human beings work. You might find one incredibly selfless and altruistic individual who can really kind of wield power in a way that is honorable and for the best for everybody, but it's just it's not realistic in the scope of history and in the scope of the future as well. And I think that's kind of it's one of the reasons why societies, as they've grown, have looked more to freedom as opposed to kind of monarchical and royalty based modes of governance and modes of existence. Because people need to feel free. They need to feel the freedom to act out what, especially, and I don't necessarily know if that's true, because I think there are some people who are perfectly okay with existing as kind of like serfs. That's I don't mean that to be condescending. I just mean that like some people they thrive when they have something to do, and this kind of I would say falls into like the leader follower dichotomy, and it's not necessary. It's not ignoble or it's not wrong to be a follower, but if you have a society where people are only allowed to be followers and you can't, and your leaders cannot rise up, do not feel the freedom to rise up and speak their mind and do the things that allow them to change and make changes to the system and kind of the larger culture as a whole, then you're just going to end up kind of running into the ground, digging like this rut of sameness, and that eventually just leads to like revolution. Like people just get so tired of it, and they're like, and then you get one guy or maybe a group of people who are just like, yeah, we're sick of this, and I have good ideas too, and here they are, and the only way we can get these good ideas out is by overthrowing the government or whatever the context might be, and so they do it, and it's it's not conducive. Power as a mode of governance and control is not conducive to functioning human relationships and human societies, and I think that's kind of a long tangent on the main idea of Lord of the Rings. And I have one more idea that I want to kind of discuss and flesh out quickly, but I need to tend to some business. All right, we're back. And so the last idea that I really wanted to touch on was just why Frodo and the hobbits seem to be particularly unsusceptible, I believe, to the One Ring and its kind of draw. And I think this is a really interesting idea in the entire story, but the hobbits in general, their society is not one that's based on power or the inclusion of power. There's no one hobbit who is like who's mega powerful, who's passing out dictates and things like that. And so it seems that when hobbits come into contact with the One Ring, they are affected, but not as affected as others. I think this is kind of seen in excuse me, in the idea of Bilbo. Um, Bilbo owned the ring for decades, many years, and as far as I can tell, he only put it on once when he first needed to get past Gollum in the Hobbit, and then he brought it back to the Shire. He put it in a little envelope, and maybe I think he got it out a couple of times and looked at it, but he never put it on again because it's not something that he needed to do. He had family and friends around him. He had a great community, and he never felt the need to exercise that power again. So I think that's also why Frodo and also Samwise are perfect stewards for the ring, because partly they don't understand, and partly they just don't care about the power that's given to them by this one ring. But they still feel the draw, and it's kind of this idea that I think power can corrupt anybody, even the most benevolent and the most kind-hearted individuals, when they are touched by just kind of like unfettered, undying power. They feel it, and they feel the draw towards it, because it's an alluring thing to feel. To have power over something else, to have control over something, is not. It's a strange feeling, and it's a strange allure of humans, but it also, it kind of makes sense. Everybody wants to be at the top, at the kind of the top of the hierarchy, but and power is a seemingly easy way to get there, but it's not the only way. I would say the most reliable and the most practical way to enter the top of a hierarchy is competence, and not just competence in whatever it is that you're doing, but competence in taking what you're doing, expressing it in a way that includes everybody else. And that's one thing that the Shire kind of represents perfectly. It's almost commune-like in its nature. It's a bunch of hobbits who are working together, not necessarily working together, but working in harmony to create a society where nothing really ever goes wrong. I mean, there's like kind of the common there are some unsavory bits of the society, but that's all societies. I mean, you can't expect everybody to get along, but everyone gets along to the point where the society is harmonious, and there are some undesirable hobbits, some more crude hobbits who are kind of outlined at the end of the book, and it's really only a few hobbits, where Saruman kind of returns to the Shire, and he kind of becomes this ruling force, kind of like this king of the Shire. And I think there's one or two hobbits that are helping him do that, but for the most part, all of them are kind of very oppressed and very ready to get back to how the Shire was, because it's really kind of a beautiful single harmonious society, and it's closed off, which is kind of one reason why I think that was able to continue for so long. And the idea of Saruman kind of entering and corrupting the Shire in that way is another metaphor for kind of the corrupting force of evil. Because Saruman was not, as far as I can tell, was not always an evil person. It seems to be his communication that he had with Sauron, and his discovery of the One Ring, that led him to this evil place, and also kind of the people that he just had around him. His servant type person, Wormtongue, was not the most noble of beings. he was kind of this backstabby, kind of treacherous individual who first was a servant to the King of Rohan. And I always get him and the King of Gondor mixed up because they have similar names. I'll just label him the King of Rohan. And he kind of saps the life force out of that man because he's just so like gossipy and just kind of snivelly and snake like, and it's revealed that he is kind of a spy for Saruman. And so eventually he returns to Saruman after he's discovered who he is, and it seems that whoever has this man around him kind of it doesn't necessarily progress down the path of good any farther. He's kind of a corrupting force in and of himself, and but that's not it. I mean, Saruman also had contact with Sauron, who is probably the greatest corrupting force. He corrupted an entire race of orcs and a bunch of different races of humans, or clans of humans, I guess you would probably call them, and other creatures and stuff like that. He created the ring wraiths, so he's certainly an evil person in and of himself, and just having contact with him kind of changed Saruman into this really evil person and this very vengeful person. So when Saruman is kind of cast out of Isengard after he's defeated by the Ents and Merry and Pippin, and it's pretty much just the Ents who do that. He makes his way back to the Shire, and he kind of takes it over as this king figure, and he rules with certainly an iron fist. And that whole idea kind of speaks to one of the oldest metaphors in the history of metaphors, and that is the snake in the garden, of Eden, which is a metaphor for evil kind of permeates all places eventually if you give it enough time, or if you kind of evil is everywhere, and not necessarily in like the greatest capacity, but you also can't underestimate evil's ability to kind of corrupt you. If you allow it in, it will grow. And I think that's kind of the final metaphor of the book, although that metaphor probably kind of exists in kind of different microcosms throughout the story. But that's and it's also really interesting that Frodo kind of returns. I thought that was a really interesting part of the book, because you're going through, you're reading Return of the King, and you get to the destruction of the One Ring and the death of Gollum, and Frodo gets his finger bitten off, and you're like, okay, that's the end of the story, right? I mean, that's the entire quest that these guys have been on the whole time. Why would the story need to progress after this? But then they go back to Gondor and do some like celebrating and stuff. But then the original Fellowship, they all kind of make their way back to the Shire, they're all kind of making their way back to different places, and they make Gimli and Legolas have some plans, and Galadriel, who's not a member of the Fellowship, but she does follow them back to her forest, which I'm forgetting the name of as well. I'm not good at names, but and then Gandalf sees them all the way back to the place where they met Tom Bombadil, and he wanted to have some words with Tom, which Tom is also a really interesting character in the book. He's kind of this really powerful force who exists outside of everything that's happening. They meet him once, and he has a lot of very useful and seemingly powerful tricks, and he seems like a very competent and powerful person, but he's outside of it all. He kind of rules over this little domain that is the forest outside of the Shire, and this little pasture where he saves the original four hobbits, Merry, Pippin, Sam, and Frodo, from like a malevolent tree that's like eating them or something. And Tom is a strange character, and I would like to analyze him a little bit more, but I think I'll need to read the book a couple more times. But anyway, Frodo and Sam and Pippin end up getting back to the Shire to find it in shambles and having been corrupted by by Saruman and Wormtongue and some random like humans that he's found in the woods that I think are north of the Shire. There's like a band of humans that he kind of recruits to help him take control of the Shire, and Frodo and Sam, they overthrow him. They kind of use this courage that they had found along their journey to come back and do good for the Shire. It's because if you think about if Sam and Frodo and Merry and Pippin had been in the Shire the whole time and had never undertaken this quest, had never really been exposed to anything outside of the Shire, they probably wouldn't really understand what danger they were in when Saruman returns, or what the utility of their courage is, and they might have also just kind of fallen under the boot of Saruman and not had the courage to stand up and fight against him, and so it's the journey that they undertook was ultimately important in saving their home, the place that they love the most. So that's a powerful metaphor too, and also one that needs to be a little bit more thoroughly analyzed. That's kind of a very basic analyzation of that, but yeah, it's a great story. I would recommend it to anybody. It's really good. Tolkien is like the man. The detail and kind of intricacies and nuance that exist within these 3 books and the books before it are pretty astounding and almost like biblical in their scope and their utility. It's a really great story, and it's stood the test of time, and I think will continue to stand the test of time because it's timeless. It's a story that will have a context through probably all of humanity. I mean, power and the pursuit of power and the struggle with power and the struggle to overthrow and unseat unsavory power, and really just the idea of power in general are things that all civilizations have had to deal with, and it's good to remember that. But one thing that I think was said, a quote that I actually heard pretty recently, and I can't remember who said it, so I apologize to whoever said this, but it's essentially, well, it kind of harkens on, it kind of makes me think of like a novel like 1984, which I also read fairly recently, where if you have a population that is kind of literate and understands, can read, like, and it's kind of that simple. If you have a population that read and pays attention to what they're reading and has also a good source of literature, then you can never really be overthrown or be taken advantage of, because you can find these ideas in a number of different stories, and it's just kind of that simple. A smart, well-read, well-educated, and eye-opened population, kind of awoken population, is not one that is easily controlled. So, yeah, Lord of the Rings, read it, enjoy it, because it's gonna be around forever, and I hope that's true. So this has been some analyzation. I can't really talk. Analyzation. There we go. Analyzation of that particular story. I enjoy that story very much. I hope to pass it on to anyone who might want to read it, because it's well worth the 2,000 plus pages that exist within it, depending on what edition you're reading. Anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 pages. But that's that. I'm going to keep rambling if I keep rambling. So, hope everyone's having a good Monday, and has a good rest of the week, and keep reading. Read books. Good books. Yeah. that is all for today. Bye.